I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone.
Hello, welcome to the Hormone Genius Podcast. Today is a special episode. All of you who have been listening, I think, have a stirring in your heart about women's health, about your own personal wellness, kind of a little bit of a fire in the sense of, man, let's make some changes in this culture around how we see the woman's body, how we're treating the woman's body. And all of this starts with education. Jamie and I love to, really, it's the reason why we started this podcast. We really believe education is empowerment. And today I'm going to be asking Jamie questions because, one of Jamie's unique attributes and her scope and of knowledge comes from her master's in community health and education. And so from the very beginning, she's really been proactive at helping women understand their bodies and then taking it to the next level. And all of us who really do believe this is something that could change the world, we want to take it to the next level. And maybe some of you are asking the question, for me, how do I take it to the next level? And so we're going to offer some ideas today about, maybe what that looks like. So Jamie, from the beginning of when we started together and how we met and how I got to know you, like when we decided, let's do a podcast, what was going on in your head and what were the kind of like ideas and things that you were thinking about that has led you to this moment now where you are teaching women to teach other women across the world?
Yeah. Really, I've always been inspired by the ripple effect. This idea that, if we can say yes to our body and if we can empower other women to say yes to their body, it doesn't just stop there. Like it then impacts friendship conversations. It impacts mother-daughter conversations simply just by sharing what we know about the truth of our body to anyone, whether a small group or a large group. The impact is vast because when women especially, but men, but when women especially, when their eyes are open to the truth of who they are and how their body works, especially because there's so much suffering around it, they want to tell other people. It's like our birthright. And in the olden days, when we used to live in like the village communities and all this and that, people probably, we lived with our cousins and our aunts and our grandparents, and it probably came up from more than just the mother, but right now we have our mother, we have our family, we have our immediate family who lives with us. And sometimes those conversations, I imagine, don't happen like they may have in the past. I'm only just guessing. Or even just seeing my aunts or my relatives breastfeeding, or seeing my aunts or relatives pregnant, and even maybe being there at the birth. I feel like just being a woman, the art of being woman, is almost being lost. And so I just feel very called to ignite the hearts of women in this area of women's healthcare, because that's exactly what happened to me when I learned about this. It felt like my heart was set aflame. And I'm sure that is how it felt for you too, Teresa. Do you remember like the season of your life or the moments where your heart was stirring and you're like, it's like the lights turned on? Before it was black and white and now you live in color. Do you remember that? Because I do. And it was like a very moving, beautiful time of my life. And I want other women to experience that.
Yeah. And I remember feeling, especially when I got probably halfway to 3/4 of the way through my nursing program and then into my nurse practitioner program. Yeah. There was definitely a stirring and a questioning, a questioning of what the status quo was. And also, all of us grow up and we just learn, right? We learn from our parents, we learn from teachers, and hopefully that's a foundation, but hopefully then you start to think for yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what we want. We want people to critically think, you know, so that they can come to their own conclusion of what the truth is. I mean, truth is truth, but yet all of us kind of come to that point where you're like, oh, obviously this is truth. This is goodness. This is what leads to fulfillment and goodness. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, Jamie. And when you were talking about community from the standpoint of really this is historically changed, and I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about the exact same thing you were, which is about that women and men and families, like it was bigger than just your little isolated mom and dad and kids. It was aunts and uncles and grandparents. And, you know, maybe that time of life was better in some ways because we had more support as women. It wasn't like you just doing this all on your own. Like you got to have a career, you got to take care of your kids, you got to run the home, you got to do all these things. Maybe there was more support in an earlier time that we don't have, and that's okay to some degree, but then how do we really give each other support? Because I think everybody knows that relationship between humans is what makes us all thrive.
Yeah.
So as women, how can we help each other? And I think again, this is a movement, I think, to change even how we see feminism.
Totally.
Right.
Yep.
So, you know, Jamie, even kind of a couple, or I don't know when it was, but a year or so into the podcast, you started talking about the idea that you might have this idea to help build a hormone coaching program, which I was like, whoa, that's amazing. And I just can't believe still the amount of work that you put in to doing this. So tell us a little bit about Fiat, particularly the word Fiat and what that means to you, but then how that ended up leading to you, you know, starting this incredible Fiat Institute.
Yeah. Truly, it was, if anybody has had an experience like this, you know what I mean, but it felt really like a call. Like it felt like a call. Whereas if I chose to do anything different, it would feel like I was doing something wrong. So it feels like I'm very much anchored in on this word fiat because, and I shared about this experience in the very first season of our Hormone Genius podcasting world. I think it was the first season where I was really discerning and I was asking the Lord in my middle 20s, like, Lord, what are you calling me to do with this fire I have in my heart to share with women about their fertility cycle? Because again, I recall when my heart was ignited and I started learning about the genius and just the science and biology of my fertility cycle. It wasn't just centered around fertility, but when I was learning it as a young woman engaged to be married, of course I was thinking about my family, my future family someday. And what I realized with that information, with that ignition, was that I wasn't just invited to say yes to my fertility and understand it more. I was invited to say yes to everything else that follows. So I was invited to say yes to my female body, which I've always had a very uncomfortable relationship with. In high school, definitely in middle school, which that is not a unique scenario, but I never really felt like my other friends who would feel maybe more comfortable in more feminine clothes. I just wasn't really like that. I wasn't flaunty at all, and I was uncomfortable. So it was this beautiful invite into the yes of understanding my cycle, and it's incredible because I love science and biology, so it was very fascinating. But like I said, it was also an entry point into the yes of woman. And it was like I was beginning to understand more about what woman is. I wasn't into frills. I wasn't into pink. I wasn't into baby dolls when I was young. I wasn't like super into the mall, you know, what everybody thinks of as like the woman thing. But truly, being woman is so much deeper. So in this season of life, when I was praying and I was asking the Lord, like, what are you calling me to do? I have this heart. It was this one night, one evening where I just kept hearing fiat in my mind over and over and over. And at the time, I thought he was encouraging me to call my fertility care center Fiat Fertility Care Center because I'm a fertility care practitioner. And, you know, in the training that I was going through, you're invited to think about what you want to call your center. And again, for the full story, you guys can go back to season 1 and listen to it. But it was in that moment when I kept hearing fiat that I knew it meant something more, but I never even knew what that word was. Like I heard it at night, didn't know what it was, woke up the next morning, looked it up, and I realized it was Mary's response to the angel Gabriel when the angel Gabriel was sending this message to Mary, inviting her from the Lord to be the mother of Christ. She said, Fiat voluntas tua, which means let it be done to me according to thy word. So in that moment, I knew that not only was I supposed to call the things I do Fiat, so I'm calling this Fiat Institute. I had Fiat Fertility Care Center, but that also my role or my assignment was to encourage other women to say Fiat. So he's inviting me to say Fiat, but my job is to help other women say Fiat. So that's been kind of the life's work of my professional life. And again, it matters beyond just fertility, because in my own experience, it was womanhood, but as it was as a pregnant woman, I know my pregnancy felt different than it would have if I didn't understand my fertility cycle and my feminine genius first. With labor and delivery, 100% I know it was different than it would have felt if I was totally uninformed. Same thing with breastfeeding. And also I can say motherhood. It just put a light on it, a perspective on it that is such a gift that I would not have been able, I believe I would not have experienced womanhood the same if I didn't learn what I had learned in my mid-20s.
So I've got a lot of things going through my head. Number one, I'm thinking about a patient that I had who very specifically, she had been put on birth control from a very young age. So very common story of a woman who's on birth control for many years. Yeah. And then later on in her 30s, actually, finally starts learning about her fertility cycle. I mean, it's just crazy to think about this. But one of the things that she was able to express to me is that she felt out of touch with her femininity, didn't realize it. But until she understood her body and understood her cycle and understood her hormones, she finally felt in touch with her femininity. And I think that's probably a very common experience that, a lot of women would have, because they just don't know. And the other thing that I'm thinking about, Jamie, is just, again, from a historical perspective, isn't it interesting how we do these like swings from one extreme to another? So many times it's like a overcorrection of a problem.
Yeah.
So like historically, like nobody talked about sex, nobody talked about periods. Like I'm talking, maybe World War I, II generation, it was very much my mom, like she didn't even know. I mean, when she was pregnant and going to have a baby, like literally she didn't even know what was going to happen. Like she didn't even know, she knew nothing, but it was like, you just assume people just like drop babies and, like they figure it out. That was one extreme, like no talking. It's just not appropriate to talk about that stuff. And then we went through the sexual revolution where, you can talk about anything, you can do anything you want, like freedom on all levels, right? But yet somewhere in the middle, when we infused birth control into that and the birth control pill, we still ended up at a place with nobody understanding their bodies. Like you would have thought, like somewhere in the middle there, we would have been like, oh, but educate women about their bodies, educate men about their bodies and how their fertility works, because we're so empowered and so free and we can talk about all this stuff now. But we ended up in a place where still there's ignorance about how the human body works. And I just kind of find that interesting and fascinating. And I'd love to hear kind of just your thoughts around that too. And
totally. Because we think about that as, being an educated woman means I'm an empowered woman. And a lot of that messaging was what was going on, which great. That's true. Being an educated woman means, you are empowered with more information. But what information were we getting? Like, what was it? Because we can be told information, but is that information correct? Are we getting a full story? Are we getting the full span of education or information? And while we might have learned more about economics or the business world or what have you, in the 60s, 70s, we weren't learning anything more about our body. Actually, the opposite was true. We shut down our body and we didn't learn how to listen to it at all. So it wasn't even that we think, oh, when a woman is empowered, it means she's educated, which I 100% believe that is true. But I like to think about ground level, and I like to think about, being at ground level means I know the basics. I don't think women even knew the basics. They knew like minus. Minus as in the information they thought they had was wrong. And that's worse than just knowing hardly anything. It's knowing the wrong information and then sharing it with everybody. And I think that's what was happening. So birth control pushed pause on advancement. We learned more about our heart health, we learned more about our brain, we learned more about our our bones and our muscles, and we were able to make advancements in medicine in all those areas of health and wellness, but not in the reproductive cycle and not in our reproductive system as women, because birth control put a big pause. So that's another really big reason too. Personally, like I feel the Lord calling me to advocate for that. Because if a woman is not being given all of her options when it comes to me being at the doctor, maybe wanting to avoid pregnancy, or me being at the doctor having extremely heavy bleeding or irregular cycles, we think that we're choosing, perhaps, but we're not if we're not given all of our options. And one of the very legitimate options for women is to track your cycle. And when I started getting very passionate about this, it was really in the realm of charting your cycle so you don't need to be on birth control, using it as a method of family planning. But the more I started learning about the fertility cycle and about how incredible it is as a vital sign of health, the more I started feeling very frustrated and angry, so mad that 60% of women are on the pill for a health reason. 60%. It's a combination. There's about 35% where it's a combination between family planning, like birth control, and health. But still, that's a lot of women on the pill with zero answers. And that is completely inappropriate and unjust. And women need to fight against that. So that was kind of the fire behind why I started Fiat Institute, Teresa, is because I know that there's the charting world, who I love. Like, I love that. I'm a fertility care practitioner. I went through the FEM training. We want to understand our cycles so we understand when we're fertile. We also want to understand our cycle patterns so we can switch on over to a doctor. They can run labs and all these things. But if 60% of women, the majority of women, are on the pill for a health reason, what training are we getting as practitioners to support that woman who is on it for a health reason? Like, as fertility care practitioner, my job is to help a woman avoid or achieve pregnancy, right? Naturally, or just understand what their body is saying. But nothing about how I was formed was about how to get to the root cause. And I feel like that's so vital these days because of just the number alone of women who are on the pill. And so that's kind of where Fiat Institute fits. We're really targeting those women who are put on the pill for a health reason, or who would have been put on the pill for a health reason, but are trying to figure it out on their own.
Jamie, I'm going to pause for a moment and then we're going to move on. But just to shout out to our podcast sponsor, We Heart Nutrition. We Heart Nutrition offers incredible quality supplements for all women and men. And I just had a patient yesterday who talked to me about ordering the Wholesome Balance supplement. And she was really hoping to get off of her antidepressant, because we talked about how the Wholesome Balance supplement could allow maybe a relaxation from anxiety and just really balance the, hormones in the brain. So I was excited to hear that people are interested in We Heart Nutrition. We certainly love their products. And so we wanted you to check it out at weheartnutrition.com. But also, we want you to know you can get a discount, 20% off with the code GENIUS, 20% off with your first order with the code GENIUS. So thank you to our podcast partners, We Heart Nutrition. Jamie, of course, we're going to move on to thinking about women out there who may want to at least inquire into becoming a hormone coach or be involved in Fiat Institute. But as you were speaking there, that righteous anger, I have felt so many times when I've been in a patient appointment, and the appointment may go something like this. I was put on, a certain type of birth control when I was 15 or 16. Nobody addressed their problem. I went through a variety of different changes with birth control. I never really got better. I'm now, 28, 29. I've been trying to get pregnant for 2 to 3 years. And here we are stuck. And what's so frustrating to me is, and I think if you're out there and you're hearing this, have you ever wondered if you could redo it all over again, what would it have looked like had you not been offered a synthetic suppressive hormone and not taking it for that 10 to 15 years or whatever amount of time it was? Sometimes I look at my patients and I want to rewind their life.
Yeah.
I want to rewind it and I want to be like, I wonder what if we just would have, like, at that moment when you're 16 or 17, you were having irregular cycles or painful periods or heavy periods, we just would have paused and said, okay, let's like take some time.
Yeah.
Let's look into this.
Right.
Take some time with it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just slapping this Band-Aid over it for the next like so many years of your life. So you have to wake up at almost 30 or more and be like, well, now I start over with the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so that righteous anger comes from a place of, it's not fair. It's not
fair
to these women that like now are looking at me like, you mean you could have helped me? Like if I just would have come to you, well, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just so important for the women out there who are like feeling this, like, yeah, I wish I could rewind my life and get another alternative, get another option for this whole thing. But maybe you think, I don't want that to happen to any more women. I don't want it to happen to my daughter. I don't want it to happen to my friend's daughter. I don't want it to happen to my grandchild or whatever. And you're like, how can I help?
Right.
Fiat Institute may be the answer. So what is specifically the hormone coaching program, Jamie? And who are the type of people that you are looking for to come to your program and learn?
Yeah. I really, there's 3 questions I ask women when they enter into the program, and especially as they exit the program. And which one of these 3 things I would ask are the reason that you did the Fiat Institute hormone coaching program? One was a mission deep in my heart, like a burning fire. I can't explain it. I feel conviction. So that's number 1. Number 2 is I have already held like a health practice. Maybe I'm a therapist or a nurse practitioner or a personal trainer, and I want to expand my knowledge. That's number 2. And number 3 is I want to make money. I want to make this a business. And that's the sole motivator. So I'm asking the sole motivator, like the top motivator. Far and away, it's the first thing I said. It's this deep, fiery conviction. I mean, we have people from the Philippines, one woman in particular, she's from the Philippines, one woman from Mexico, from Canada, from Australia. It's not just in the United States. This is a need all over the world, which is very humbling to me when I get on the phone with these ladies. But time and time again, the majority of the time, it's almost like, Jamie, I feel like the Lord is calling me to this. Like, I cannot explain it any other way. Also, I'd say women who come to me and some of the barriers that I hear in their voice, because that's something I'm getting kind of good at. I'm hearing there's patterns, kind of like the yeah buts. I always say the yeah but. I have my own hormone issue. And so who am I to be a hormone coach if I have my own hormone issue? That's something that often they say, and I say, what more beautiful of a reason? Because now you get to learn so much more than you have to help your own body. But there's something about accompaniment when we're working with the women we're serving. So I'm tying this together and saying that's one of the very unique things about Fiat Institute is it's not just a program that you go through and you learn the thing, you go through the courses, you take the test, and then you're a certified hormone coach, because there are so many programs just like that. I want to be a functional health practitioner. I want to be a gut practitioner. I want to be this, that, the other thing. You can be any of those things. But the unique piece that people are getting with Fiat Institute is it's a process, and it's an experience, and it's a transformation. Even in me, like I started this, and every cohort I'm transformed, because there's something so beautiful about each of these very unique women and how they feel called to do this work. And I can't help but be touched every single time. So that's kind of like more of the like high level heart part. I'd say in terms of more of the logistics of what makes Fiat Institute different and hormone coaching different. So hormone coaching, we train coaches to see women behind the chart. So it's not just hormone education that we learn, which they all do. We understand gut health and how that impacts our hormones, inflammation, liver, adrenals, and how that all impacts our sex hormones. We use an acronym called GILLIS that helps us kind of navigate the root cause. Like, in light of our fertility cycle, let's learn these things. So that's one thing, more logistical. But even that alone, sometimes I think this the human condition, we're trained to see just the chart. We're trained to see the data. Even me, fertility care practitioner, looking at the chart, there's rules and there's instructions, and it can be stifling. And I felt stifled because I wanted to really activate my feminine genius. And I really wanted to see that woman in that couple behind the chart. And so I started doing that. And the transformation just in that woman being seen was so healing. And so that's a huge part of hormone coaching is we see the woman behind the chart. We learn how to ask questions. We learn how to listen. Two women could have the same diagnosis, but have a completely different story and a completely different support plan simply because of their history. So, for instance, let's say I'm working with a woman or a hormone coach is working with a woman with PCOS. They're insulin resistant, they're overweight. One woman was a previous athlete and had an eating disorder versus somebody who really has no idea how to eat right. They were never taught that way. They grew up in a home where they ate hamburger helper every night. They just totally uninformed, have no idea. Even though they have the same diagnosis, that woman will not be coached the same way. They can't be. There's too many questions and there's a relationship forming. So seeing the woman behind the chart is key. So I'm going to stop there. There's more, but if you have anything to say before I kind of move on,
I want to share a little story about kind of the chart being so important. And I love that, you know that that's kind of like the foundation in a sense, or like it's the lens that we see the woman through. It's not, it's not the full picture, right? But it's the lens you're looking through to get an idea of where do we start. And again, if we're talking about hormones, the chart speaks to what the body is doing hormonally. But just to show you how, like in traditional medicine, again, we are so not focused on that. So I had a patient this week who came to me after a couple years of trying to get pregnant, has no success, and she's already been to a midwife, had a workup with the midwife, and then this is very classic, like with kind of the before you get to a reproductive endocrinologist, they might do like 3 rounds of Clomid or 3 rounds of letrozole, just kind of as a, we'll give it an old college try.
Right.
And so she had gone through that. Then she went to an actual reproductive endocrinologist, like the big ones, the big timers, to help you with infertility. Now, she did get some workup. It was but basic. And in the end, she still wanted to reach out to me because she had heard, that we do it differently. So she was, literally coming to me kind of very soon after just having, kind of the full workup with REI. So in the end, what was crazy to me, Jamie, is so I'm looking at her. She, of course, has a menstrual tracking app and she was putting her period in. She had no idea what cervical mucus was. I asked, how do you know when you ovulate? Like, what are the things that you're doing? And she's like, well, I got one of those strips that you pee on. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, is that working for you? She's like, and sometimes it was, but nobody asked her about cervical mucus. I asked, how do they tell you to have intercourse? How do they tell you when to try? And she was like, well, they just said to have intercourse between days like 9 and 16 or something. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just talk about what are the 3 ingredients you need to have a baby.
So frustrating.
You've got to have a sperm that comes from the man. You've got to have an egg that comes from the woman, and you have to have the water for the sperm to swim in. So did anybody ever clue you into the fact that we need to understand where the water is coming from? And come to find out, like, she's like, yeah, I don't really see that. I mean, this is someone with 28-day super regular cycles. And when I talked about cervical mucus, she was like, yeah, I don't really actually see any much of that. And right there, just in asking those questions, I already have a huge idea of maybe why she's not getting pregnant.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that, what they don't do, and what people who understand hormones, because of our ability to help people chart their cycle, is they weren't doing any timed hormone testing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at her hormone levels and then correlated that to where she was in her cycle. And they told her all her hormones were totally normal. She got a diagnosis of unexplained infertility, of course. Her estrogen was in the tank.
Oh my gosh.
In the luteal phase, in the tank. And so I looked at her and I was like, hey, I mean, like, I already just in one conversation with you know there's two huge things that we got to start addressing, but I got to get you to chart your cycles first, actually accurately. And we got to figure out what sort of cervical mucus. So
totally,
you know, these are the stories that I see every day, but it goes back to the education and empowerment. Had she had her own education about her body, and I told her, you would have been smarter than your doctor.
Yeah.
You would have been smarter than your doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, and those stories just, I think, speak to just why we just think this is so important, and why, you know, educating women through even hormone coaching is so important, because that's the gap stop.
Yep.
And then in a medicine world that just doesn't want to get to the root cause and is not educating their patients, this is the gap stop. We've got to do it at the ground level before women are going into doctors' offices, because then they are already able to advocate for themselves.
Yep, exactly. And that's what's so frustrating, though, is that even when the woman is informed and she's excited and she goes to talk to the doctor about the cycle, and the doctor doesn't agree and doesn't believe that this is good and real and true, how frustrating that can be. But I want to say, if this is you, if you're excited, you learn your cycle and you talk to your doctor and they think you're bonkers, find a different doctor. Literally just find a different, I mean, you don't want to spend years just meeting with the same doctor who just isn't understanding this concept. And that's what I think, again, is so important in the light of hormone coaching and wellness, is going back to that whole thing at the very beginning when my heart was ignited was, yes, your fertility cycle gives you information about the state of your health. But like you're saying, Teresa, you know, this woman, while she is talking to you about the lack of her cervical mucus, she's going to start charting her cycle. And it doesn't just stop at like, oh, there's no cervical mucus. Now we want to know, well, why is there no cervical mucus, you know? And so that's the question we're trained to ask always. So all of our clients chart. We have partnered with FEM. So many of our hormone coaches are either trained in FEM already or do get trained in FEM. But either way, we teach the client how to chart her symptoms and her biomarkers. So her period, of course, her mucus, and then she's aligning her symptoms based on where she is at in her cycle. She's rating it on an intensity level of 1 to 3. When working with our coaches, then she'll reevaluate every single time they meet, and she rates that pain scale after things that they've tried. So the hope is that maybe if she's at a 3 pain for her headaches during her period or whatever, that then it will move down to a 2 or a 1 based on lifestyle changes, kind of navigating the cause of that thing, you know, the symptom of her headache. So yeah, it's so frustrating that just the basic thing, and it's not that anybody can like copyright this information, Teresa. It's like the truth of our body. It's not like anybody should be keeping this to their chest. Like, I'm not going to share this with you because this is my thing. Think about that in my own town. Whenever I talk with women, I'm like, tell me who your doctor is and I'll tell them. I'll sit down and have a conversation. It's not a secret. Every person needs to know this information. It's maddening.
Yeah, it is It is maddening. Jamie, what does it look like to go through your program in terms of time commitment, cost? You know, how long does it take to get the golden certificate at the end? Give us kind of those details.
Yep. So it's a 3-phase and an optional 4-phase process. So the first phase is hormone education. So we spend about 2 months going through hormone education, the basics of what are hormones, what's the fertility cycle, what's even the state of women's healthcare, and why does that matter in this conversation? Gut inflammation, liver, adrenals, and how that relates to our fertility cycle. And then we talk about cycle syncing, biohacking, natural tools like herbs and essential oil supplements. So we go into all of that, very foundational, all in light of the fertility cycle as that vital sign of health. So that's the hormone education portion. And then we move into what is a coach. So, coaching methodology. What are different ways we coach? What is the scope of practice as a coach? What is a coach and what are methods we can use? And I have a special, it's called the Fiat Way coaching methodology. So our coaches like have a very specific, I didn't like look and see what other people are using to coach. It's my own, some people just recycle the same thing over and over. Although there are things that we use that are good for everyone, but there's a very unique way that the hormone coach coaches that is not found anywhere else. And then there's the coaching application. So that's phase 3. So it's education, coaching methodology, and then coaching application. And that's when the women are actually practicing their coaching with others. And so we spend a lot of time doing that. I have a team of 5 people who help. They're TAs and they get a lot of attention, one-on-one attention. So again, it's not like I'm going to go through a course, learn it on my own. This is a whole process with a community of other women. And then the optional phase, and we're adding that this upcoming year, fall of 2026, is the Fiat Business Incubator. So for people, and I love that, an incubator, like it just totally works with all of this. But for women who are really wanting more of a touch point when getting their business started, that's an option that they can add on to the full program. The full program is $5,497. The add-on will be changing, but at this point it's $1,500 for the add-on for the business incubator. So it's a 6-month training process from start to finish. They have 1 full year to complete to get certified. In terms of the comparables, in terms of how much we charge and the kind of the touch points they're getting in the group coaching and the formation, it's a very, 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 very good value. I'm encouraged all the time by the business coaches I work with that it's not enough. Like it needs to be more. Because again, you always want to think about what's the value? Is it just the education? Because I do sell the hormone education program alone and it is self-paced and it's on your own and that's $1,500. That's probably about the same price as other things when you just learn something on your own. So that's great. And if that's something you want to do, awesome. Great for people wanting to amplify their understanding who already have a business and who already have clients and they just want to expand their knowledge. But with all the additional touch points and the certification and the business license to every material I've made, you don't have to start from scratch. We have something called the Vital Cycle program, and it's a coaching program that women who come in to get coached, it's done for you already. And I'd say that's one of the biggest value adds is they don't have to build their own coaching program.
Just the coaches that I've met, Jamie, I mean, it sounds like the program seems to me to like create really joyful women. Or maybe you've chosen really joyful women.
Yeah, they are very joy filled.
Yeah. And so when I just was on a call for facts about fertility, and one of your hormone coaches, Leanne Jarvis.
Yeah.
Right? Yep, Leanne. So shout out to Leanne, one of your coaches. I know there's many out there, but just the joyfulness, so the confidence to be able to do something, a lot of times, and I know you've talked about this, Jamie, imposter syndrome and kind of, well, I know about my cycle and I know about hormones and I kind of know that, but I don't know if I know enough, to be kind of someone to help someone else. And I think that's where maybe some of you out there are like, I just don't know if I'm smart enough or good enough or whatever. And like, we want to say like, you are, and you have a gift to share with others. And like so many women, they have a personal story and a personal journey and a passion that comes from that. So I just really want to encourage you to, and if you probably, Jamie could hook you up with talking to one of the already existing hormone coaches, totally. So that you can just know a testimony from them and not even from Jamie alone, just to say, yeah, I went through this. This was really worth it. So I want people to know that this is important because again, it is creating a movement. Also, Jamie, I know people sometimes worry the kind of boundary between being a medical person, right? And then being a coach. So just explain kind of how you draw that line or how people can feel comfortable that they're not overstepping in terms of a way that would make them feel uncomfortable from a medical standpoint.
Great question. So there's something called scope of practice, and a coach should never do what a doctor is doing. They're not prescribing, they're not ordering labs, they're not reviewing lab work. They're not treating you with medication or anything like that. And even with supplements, like the language that we use, and even what we help create with the client is a co-created hormone support plan. So I'm not just going to prescribe and say, oh, these are all your issues and this is what you need to do. No, a coach, there's a fine art of coaching where you're working with the client and she is deciding. She's deciding with the information you're giving her. You're giving her information and you're hearing her and she's feeling seen and empowered. So there is a mistake out in this world, Teresa, I'm sure you've seen it, where there are people who are not doctors and they are acting like that. And that's very, very wrong. And there is legal issue there. But in terms of hormone coaching, we have a whole lesson on what is a coach and what is not a coach. Like how should we be acting and versus not. Um, so so yes, the accompaniment, the education is key. The accountability, we have something called GRACE goals. It's kind of like SMART goals. So every time we meet, there's a goal and there's a measurable, and we want to make sure we're moving forward, which again is how we're going to know that there is change. And if something is in the way, maybe there's a barrier in the way, then a coach knows and understands how to pivot and really help that woman make change. For sure.
So, and it doesn't mean, Jamie, that like, let's just say I wanted to go through the coaching program as a nurse practitioner. Like, if you already have a medical license, like you can still add hormone coaching on top of it just to further your education, so it's not just for people who just, are lay people that maybe just want to do hormone coaching. It could be for a medical professional, correct?
Yep. We've had an accountant, we've had bookkeepers, we've had marketing professionals, and we've had nurse practitioners and midwives and therapists. And so it is so interesting when I think about the span of people who've gone through my program. That alone of just knowing who's going through it tells us we aren't getting the basic information in life at all. And one of the gals who I love, she's a nurse practitioner. She worked at the Mayo Clinic and she learned so much and was so empowered that she quit that job and started her own practice.
Wow.
That's insane and awesome.
Yeah.
But I didn't really create this program thinking that somebody who is in the medical field would take my class and then do that. I mean, that was crazy to me, but it was just so, and just again, just a sign of how little we're formed and how little, again, doctors learn in med school. But, hopefully it's getting better.
Yeah, I mean, that's happening all over, right, Jamie? Doctors and nurse practitioners just kind of moving out of institutionalism, moving out of like the big hospitals and, kind of doing their own thing to feel the freedom to offer these services where sometimes you can feel constrained in traditional medicine in terms of protocols and not being able to go outside of them. So I think that's amazing. Jamie, as we wrap up, I'm going to give you an opportunity to give everybody the information of how to get in touch with you if they want to, be interested. I mean, I know you have a cohort, you call that, coming up very soon. And we want to get people signed up as soon as possible. So, because you want to be able to get in. I also know that you do this beautiful retreat, kind of at the end of your cohort, which looks awesome. And I kind of get jealous when I see pictures and see all these incredible women. They just look like they're having a beautiful time. And I hope to be able to host one of those maybe in Omaha sometime. But also I want you to just give an elevator pitch for, again, why become a hormone coach through Fiat Institute. So we'll finish with all that.
Okay, awesome. So to become a coach, it's a calling for sure. It's something where you're not only going to learn about your hormones, you're not only going to learn about how to coach that woman, but it is a transformational thing where your feminine genius becomes active. There, as a woman, and in my own discovery and that ignition I was explaining, our own hearts become ignited by understanding truly the gift of woman, and our soul mirrors our body. And so when we can truly even learn how to understand how to coach through our feminine genius, we transform into that feminine body even more. That's where that transformation comes in. It's more than just what we know. It's who we become in the process. And that's what I hear time and time again with the reviews. It's like who they've become in the process. And when we become the fullness of who we are, and we're all very unique. The conversations and the accompaniment and the coaching between us and those we serve are different than they would have been otherwise. So it is this very foundational, transformational experience. I'm making it sound maybe over dramatic, but it truly is the truth. It's just the truth of it. And yes, the cohort starts January of 2026. Seats are limited, although there are seats that are open. So if you're thinking about this, please, please, please visit my website. We'll also have information in the show notes. But we'll do a one-on-one call. There's an application process, Teresa, and all of that. So I'm excited to talk to anybody again. It's how can we be a voice in this confused world? And I'll end with that. That's the one thing that I didn't mention much, but that's one of the backbones as well. How do we speak so we can ignite the heart of women who need us? So that just advocacy and speaking and communicating well is also very critical and important when growing a hormone coaching business. How do we speak to a group of people? How do we speak to the church? How do we speak to a mom's group? Again, that's not something that you get in certifications, is how to speak well. So igniting hearts, changing minds, empowering women, activating our feminine genius, all of those things happen within the Fiat Institute.
Beautiful, Jamie. Your voice matters. All of our voices matter. So if you're hearing this, just know that you matter, your voice matters. Get involved in any way that you feel like God is calling you. But this may be an opportunity, the Fiat Institute, for you really to, kind of live out a passion that you've been feeling stirring in your heart for a very long time. Jamie, thank you. This was great. We'll talk to you at the next episode.
All right. Thanks, Teresa.
Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel. So if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.